Of all the phases of flight, it is the landing phase which is the most susceptible to severe weather conditions. The low altitude, low speed, low thrust settings and high drag during the landing phase mean that the aeroplane is at its most vulnerable. The video sequence here shows how dangerous wind shear can be in destabilizing the aeroplane during an approach to land. Landing when wind shear is observed or forecast should be avoided, but if conditions are within limits, then landing at a higher speed should be used. But caution should be exercised, since the higher landing speed will greatly increase the distance of the airborne section and ground roll of the landing. The microburst is the single most hazardous weather phenomenon to aeroplanes close to the ground. We briefly discussed the microburst phenomenon in the takeoff section, but in landing it represents an even greater threat. However, there are certain clues which can give a pilot advance warning. The most obvious clue to a potential microburst are the tendrils of rain found beneath a storm cloud, which are called virga, or fall streaks. Virga is precipitation falling but evaporating before it reaches the ground, as shown here. In the absence of specific guidance, here are some suggested techniques for identifying and dealing with a microburst encounter whilst on the approach to land. Initially, there will be an increase in airspeed and a rise above the approach path caused by the increasing headwind. On modern aeroplanes, a wind shear alert is usually given. This should be seen as the precursor to the microburst. Any hope of stabilized approach should be abandoned and a missed approach should be initiated.
Wind shear, wind shear, wind shear.
Without hesitation, the power should be increased to go around power, the nose raised, and the aeroplane flown in accordance with the missed approach procedure. Typically, the nose attitude will be about 15 degrees and the control column should be held against the buffet or stick shaker. The initial bonus of increased airspeed may now be rapidly eroded as the downdraft is encountered. Airspeed will fall and the aeroplane may start to descend despite high power and high pitch angle. The point at which the tailwind starts to be encountered may be the most critical. The rate of descent may lessen, but the airspeed may continue to fall, and any height loss may now break into obstacle clearance margins. Maximum thrust is now usually needed, and the nose attitude kept high on the stall warning margins to escape the effects of the tailwind. Had the go-around not been initiated at the early warning stage, then it is highly unlikely that the aeroplane will survive the encounter. Because wind shear, heavy rain, poor visibility, runway contamination and microbursts are hazards very closely associated with thunderstorms, it is advisable never to land with a thunderstorm at or in the immediate vicinity of the aerodrome. Delay the landing or consider diverting. There are too many cases to list of pilots who have attempted to land in bad weather and they have sadly perished along with many passengers. Most of these occurrences were avoidable had due account been made of the situation. The last factor to consider that affects the landing is the configuration of the aeroplane in terms of the flap settings. Flaps are trailing edge devices used to increase the camber of the wing and generate more lift, thereby reducing the landing speed. However, the use of a lot of flap will dramatically increase aerodynamic drag as well. This is a benefit in landing and helps to slow the aeroplane down. Let's take a look at how different flap angles can affect the landing distance. With no flap, the aircraft will have a much faster approach speed and have very little aerodynamic drag. Therefore, the landing distance will be large. However, with some flap selected, the approach speed is less. There will be more aerodynamic drag and consequently the landing distance will be smaller. However, with full flap, the approach speed is minimal and the aerodynamic drag is maximised. Therefore, the landing distance will be least compared to other flap settings. Having full flap selected for landing allows the aeroplane to maximise its landing mass. However, there is a disadvantage with having full flap if there was a situation where the aeroplane needed to abort the landing and go around for another attempt. You will recall that large flap angles greatly deteriorate the climb performance compared to no flaps. Therefore, in a go-around, after the climb has been established, retract the flaps as soon as possible in the manner prescribed in the aeroplane flight manual. This completes the lesson on general landing performance. In this lesson, you should have learnt and understood all the components affecting the landing, and more importantly, what determines the landing performance. Learn the capabilities of your aeroplane and never attempt to exceed them. Never fall prey to time pressures, and never cut corners in your landing preparations or your landing checks. Always prepare for the worst.